Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tony. And thank you to NIAA for inviting us to be part of your program. It's an honor for this cowgirl to be talking about how we do it in Canada. I was not part of the history and the discussions you're having now that we probably had in Canada 15, 20 years ago. That was not part of my world. So I'm going to stick to talking about how we do it every day at our house, and hopefully that will give you a bit of an overview of our traceability system in Canada. Because it's impossible to get into a lot of details in terms of all the different nuances in traceability, and knowing that it took me about 6 months to learn it, obviously I'm not going to be able to get into great details, but I'll try to explain the roles. I'll try to give you an overview of the regulations right now in Canada for livestock. I'll give you a snapshot of how it works. We'll talk about approved indicators. Indicators is a new word in our world. We're switching from tags to indicators. Same thing, but it is definitely the more politically correct term now in terms of all official documents. And if we have time, I'll go over some of the other activities that are within our scope. So in terms of roles in traceability, it's really divided in two groups, and to no surprise, I'm sure you'll understand that government has a big role in terms of being the regulators and the enforcers. That part of the Canadian government that takes care of that is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, or CFIA. They create the regulations and they enforce them under the National Livestock Identification Regulation or under the Health of Animals Act. In terms of industry, the program is administered by what we call responsible administrators. And currently there are 3 in Canada. Quebec, the province of Quebec, so for quick geography or quick lesson in Canada, we have 10 provinces. One of them is Quebec in eastern Canada. Their provincial regulations in traceability go above and beyond the federal regulations, so they have their own administrator to take care of that. The pork industry also has its own administrator called PicTrace. And then there's us at the Canadian Cattle Identification Agency, or CCIA. So unfortunately, the acronyms are very similar, and we're often confused between CFIA and CCIA. So who are we? CCIA, as I mentioned, we're a responsible administrator. So we are a for-nonprofit organization. We're led by industry, and we established a national livestock identification program and traceability initiatives to support the traceback. So there's been lots of talk, and Brian did a great job talking about that traceability is beyond animal disease control or tracing and all the add-ons. But first and foremost, our first mandate is to make sure that we can have information available to government or perhaps other parties that may need to trace back information for whatever reason. Our database is called the Canadian Livestock Tracking System, or CLTS, another acronym that it's amazing to me that I've been in the cattle business my entire life, and until I started working at CCIA 3 years ago, I've never heard of the CLTS. So when I tell producers that they have a CLTS account, they have no idea where we're referring to. But it is basically the name of our database, and that's where all the information is kept, from animal identification all the way to movement, premises identification, and so on and so forth, and of course, retirements. So as a responsible administrator, we have a strategic plan, and we have a mission and a vision and a mission statement. So we want to be class leaders in livestock traceability, because we really want to allow our industry to reach its maximum potentials. So that's pretty vague in terms of a vision. Basically, we're doing our best to do what we're supposed to do in terms of keeping the information safe, keeping the information flowing if it needs to flow. But there's also all kinds of add-ons that could help our industry, and I think that's what Brian was referring to with all the other added values that could come from a traceability system. So in terms of our mission statement, we provide leadership and secure, cost-effective traceability services to the livestock industry while we're fostering strategic partnerships and developing innovative solutions that will enhance Canadian livestock industry. I often refer to us as the meat in the sandwich. Between government and industry, that's where we stand. We have some very clear directions in terms of our mandate and our agreement with government. But really and truly, we're industry, and we're there to help them be compliant, get more out of their investments in traceability, and make this well above and beyond health or animal disease control. So you may wonder how we're set up. So we have a board of directors. I think it's important that you understand that our structure is basically a membership of organizations. So 16 associations are our members, and they represent all kinds of sides of the industry. We're a little cattle-centric, though we do have other species under our umbrella as well. But our member organizations are, again, very cattle-centric, but we also have the auction marts, so the Livestock Markets Association, the livestock dealers, the veterinarians, the Meat Council, the Purebred Breeders Group, which is the Canadian Beef Breeds Council, and so on and so forth. We also offer membership to each species that we administer. So we have the Canadian Sheep Federation, the Canadian Bison Association, and the Dairy Farmers of Canada. So while dairy cattle are bovines, same as all the other cattle, they like to think that they need to have a special seat or have a special say in terms of our organization. So they do have a membership and therefore have a seat on our board of directors. We are in the middle of expecting amendments to our regulations. These have been talked about for quite some time. When I started at CCIA in June of 2015, we were expecting the first draft of those regulations to be posted that year or early 2016. And here we are in 2018, and we're still not there, but I think that it will be this fall. And in this round of amendments, we are expecting goats and farm cervids to be regulated. And both species have chosen the Canadian Cattle Identification Agency as their administrator. So once they are regulated, we will add them to our membership, and therefore they will have a seat on our board of directors. In terms of staff, so what does it take to run this CCIA? So our staff is actually quite limited. Client support is the biggest group. So those are the people on the phone in our call center. They are there to address every inquiry that comes our way. From selling indicators, we do sell tags directly to producers, all the way to how to fix the system. Folks who may find a stray animal that is wearing one of our tags and they would like to know what to do with that. All inquiries come to 6 people right now that are actively working in our call center. So that's not a lot of people to address 19,000 inquiries last year alone. Of course, it takes also a big IT team because the database requires not only maintenance but lots of developments. And we are in a techie world, so there's 6 of them on the IT group. Support and finance would be the next group. Communication, while I will refer to that probably several times over this presentation, it's amazing that 2 people can handle all the communication needs that we encounter at CCIA. We have 2 field staff, we have 1 animal indicator specialist, and we have in-house counsel. One thing that we find that you need a lawyer. If you're going to deal with regulations, if you're going to deal with government, you need a lawyer. So that is our staff, again, that administers the entire group of animals that CCI is responsible for. You may not be able to read this, but not every organization can become a responsible administrator, so you have to qualify. So organizations that want to do this apply to CFIA and have to receive some sort of indications that they do qualify for that. And there's lots of criteria in governance and capacity and in database and data management. So our main responsibilities, so what is it that we do? So everything to do with the animal indicators, basically from coordinating the testing that is needed for approval all the way to sales. We allocate, manage the regulatory data, so all the data that is collected in the field that comes back to us. Actually, this should say allocate and not evaluate to manufacturers. So we allocate numbers to manufacturers when they're ready to fabricate indicators, and then we issue them from the point of sales to accounts for each regulated party. Communication, as I mentioned before, it's a huge, huge portion of what we do. And of course, we protect the security and integrity of Part 15 data. So speaking of which, and I know it's been an irritant in terms of developing your system and moving forward with it, but all the information that comes to our database is protected under the Privacy Act in Canada. So we do not share it. It's very restricted. It's Fort Knox. It doesn't go anywhere. The information is considered private. And if I go back to my stray animal that I was mentioning before, when we get calls, so if someone was to find a stray cow with an RFID number that belongs to this box, and call and say, I would like to know who this animal belongs to so I can let them know that I found their animal, we would not be able to tell them that. So we would facilitate the 3-way communication by contacting who we think may own this animal. If it appears that it's the right place, then we would offer them to either go back to the first caller and let them know that we found the owner, or we would offer that they can connect with each other with consent. So just a quick example to let you know that the information would never be mentioned on the phone or revealed to anyone. And it's certainly impossible to search our database from an outsider's access. So the 3 pillars of traceability that we're sort of in the middle of, and we are also very much in a bookend regulation or system right now. So animal identification is a big part of it, but premises identification is becoming also it's in progress right now, but also becoming very important as we are expecting in the proposed regulations amendments that animal movement will become regulated. So that will be based on the premises identification. So those are the 3 pillars that we are able to take information on, and whether it's regulated or not, some folks do want to submit on a voluntary basis, and we welcome their information, but not all of it is regulated at this moment. So speaking of regulations, what is regulated in Canada? So in terms of bovines, of course, beef cattle, dairy cattle, and bison, sheep, and swine. So that is what's currently regulated. And as I mentioned before, we're expecting goats and farmed cervids to join when the amendments are in effect. So in the bookend system, in animal identification, so all cattle, sheep, and bison must be tagged with an approved indicator prior to moving from their current location or leaving their farm of origin. So pretty simple. If you're going to get on a truck or go anywhere, you have to have a tag. The intermediate sites, so that would be auction marts, assembly yards, fairs and exhibitions, and other, well, I like to call them commingling sites. In terms of regulations, they're called intermediate sites. if they receive those animals without a tag, it is their responsibility to apply a tag. So that is their contribution to the animal identification piece. We also have tagging sites, so knowing that not every producer is able to apply tags to their animals, tagging sites are there basically to provide facilities for those who need to bring their animals to something that is better equipped to apply tags, or perhaps can provide manpower to do so. So in that case, if animals are being transported on their way to a tagging site, it is not illegal to not have tags in their ears. But you better be going to a tagging site, or you could be fined, or you could be responsible for some consequences. So the other end of the story is what we call retirements. So while we know what happens to the animals, the tag number is what is retiring. And for cattle and bison, it's mandatory for slaughterhouses to report the retirement of that number within 30 days. We are expecting in the proposed amendments that will change to 7 days. So a huge change for for that industry in terms of the turnaround time of reporting the information. I also added that for sheep, the retirement is not currently regulated. So how does it work from manufacturer to animals? So manufacturers will obtain a series of ISO numbers from us. So when they need to fabricate a batch of tags, so they call us and they get a batch of numbers. So we are the guardian of those numbers, so there's never a duplication in the system. That's an allocation. Once the tags are fabricated, they go to our warehouse or the distributor that we work with in CDMV. They are the organization that helps us with all the distribution of the tags, whether they go to directly to producers or go to our network of dealers. So as I mentioned before, indicators can be purchased directly from us. We have a web store, self-serve web store. They can also call our call center. And we also have our network of 800 retailers across the country that we call dealers. So those are farm stores, feed stores, veterinarian clinics, that type of thing. They may become dealers if they wish. So once the indicators are sold, either channels, the numbers, so a regulated party purchasing indicators will receive those numbers into their CLTS account. So this is basically the reporting that Party A has purchased these 25 tags from this to that, and whether they're buying from us direct or buying from a dealer, that has to happen within 24 hours. So in terms of the indicators themselves, we currently have 8 approved RFID tags for beef from 5 different manufacturers. All of them and I'll stick to the beef side of it for now, are yellow, as the pictures indicate. They have their ISO number, and they have our trademark, which is the 3/4 maple leaf and the CA acronym on them. In terms of bison, dairy, and sheep, they have different indicators, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but they're specific to their industry in terms of what's being out there with much less choices. But those would be so bisons are white, sheep and dairy are white as well, and sheep are yellow. I did not put a slide up for goats and cervids, but even though those species are not regulated, there's been some pre-approved indicators identified by government and by our industry group, and that will be made available prior to regulations. In fact, the goat indicators are already available now. So in terms of getting tags or indicators approved, there's quite a process. And I know we have several manufacturers in this room and they can attest to this. That is pretty complicated. And there's a 36-page framework, or perhaps it's longer. I always stop reading about page 36. But we do facilitate the testing. There's a field test for 1 year, and then there's a series of tests in an ICAR-approved lab that has to take place. So once the results are available, we will take a look at them. So at CCIA, we have a technology advisory group, a technical advisory group. As a subcommittee of our board, they'll look at the results and they'll make recommendations to recommend a tag or new tag, or in the event of problems with a tag, to revoke a tag. From our board, it goes as an official request to CFIA, so to government, and consequently to the Ministry of Agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture. So that is the very, very quick snapshot of something that is very heavy and is very highly complicated. And Linda's looking at me shaking her head as we've all suffered through this with our manufacturers that are very, very patient with us. But there is a process. It's not every tag that is available that is able to enter the Canadian market. Other things that we do with the CLTS in terms of events, so all the information that we can capture, we call them events. So we do offer a cross-reference for indicators that have to be replaced, because unfortunately, retention is not 100%. Now, this will come as a shock to you, but it's probably the single, the one complaint and the one topic that is difficult to solve, because we hear it, and we hear it a lot, that the tags don't last long enough or get snagged, or for whatever reason. I've heard them all, but that is definitely possible that an indicator has to be replaced, and there is a cross-reference event for those who wish to do that. It is not regulated. Movements, we are able to take move in and move out, depending on who would like to report that, by groups or by individuals. So again, this is not federally regulated. It is provincially regulated in Alberta to report a move-in feedlots of 1,000 head or more. So those folks are required to report all the numbers, individual numbers of animals that are moving into the feedlots throughout the year. But in terms of federal regulations, it is not regulated. Now, we do expect that that's the big piece of the amendments that are coming this fall. So this will be a big change for all regulated parties when that comes into effect. We can take age verification, and consequently, regulated parties can produce birth certificates for animals. Their birth certificates are anonymous, so they do not say where they come from. They just verify that these particular tag numbers have a birth date attached to them in the system for whomever is going to buy them or would need that information at the next stop. Again, only regulated in Alberta, not in the rest of the country. Well, actually in Quebec it is. But as I mentioned before, Quebec has its own traceability system and its own administrator, and really the two are not connected at all. And of course, regulated parties can look at their tag inventories and sort out the ones that have been applied, the ones that have perhaps been lost, or the ones that are not applied and still available, and so on and so forth. I talked about our call center. So currently we offer client support Monday to Friday, 7 to 5. So we are not a 24/7, but we do have a pretty substantial resource center on our website, so folks can find instructions on how to use the CLTS at any time. And I always like to say it's got instructions about everything, really easy to follow, instructions that even men can understand. So. So, probably the newest tool that we're providing our regulated parties is a phone app. So we have a CLTS mobile app that is available to all regulated parties with a CLTS account. They can report what they wish to report from the app. It is our vision that someday the app will be completely fluent in all the events that are in the CLTS, and it will be a true mirror of one another. At this point, it is not, but it's getting there. And we also want to ramp up our app so it could be used in the event of not being in a cell phone service area. I'm sure you would have the same problem as we do in terms of cell coverage, and especially rural areas where cell coverage is average at best. So we want our phone app to be able to take the information, whether you're in cell service area or not, and then to download into the CLTS once you return into an area where cell coverage is better. Other things that we do at CCIA, we do a lot of research and development, and basically our main goal there is to come up with solutions. In being the meat in that sandwich, our role is to facilitate compliance. So if we can offer new tools to regulated parties in terms of making this a little bit easier for them, we feel that that's our job. So our research and development is really focused on finding these alternative solutions. I mentioned tag complaints or tag problems. Believe it or not, that's a big chunk of one person's time to address those complaints. And we do have a system how folks can report. We always encourage them to send us the tag itself if they can find it, so we can see a visual problem and perhaps take that back to our manufacturer and address improvements for the future. And of course, communication, as it's been mentioned several times. Our CLTS database is used in some added value functions. The Beef Information Exchange System, or BIX, is one of those chain of custody type of service. And Deb Wilson is here, and I'll encourage you to visit with her. She can talk about what they do at BIX that is way above and beyond what we would do in our world. But with consent, folks who are signed up for BIX can get their tag inventory and their animal information to flow from us to BIX and back if needed. You may have heard of our dairy industry coming up with their own initiative called ProAction. ProAction, again, is above and beyond regulations, and it's an industry initiative, and they use the CLTS to capture the information that they wish to capture. And there's others like the Verified Beef Production Plus and many more, always with the consent of the users and always in a situation where those programs are already established and they leverage the information that we have, but not the other way around. We would not use our database to start up some sort of value-added program or to help one particular program over another. I'm going to stop here because I believe I'm out of time. But I do thank you for your time. I am here for the next few days, so while I know I had to be there was a lot of details that were left out and I had to stay to the surface, but if I can help you in understanding our system, I certainly encourage you to look me up and we can discuss it afterwards. So thank you very much for your time.